Welcome to a GGRecon interview featuring Christopher Graham, assistant coach of the Philadelphia Fusion. The goal of the interview will be to look behind the curtain of the online persona and talk about Christopher's history, his underlying beliefs, principles, and incentives as an esports professional. I think throughout us two knowing each other, you were always very open with sharing your ideas and philosophies in a field that usually is about competitive advantages and privacy, as well as, not like making the next 2 weeks based on what you said a living hell for your team. How did you decide to want to be so open with your ideas?
Well, it's interesting. I've read across my coaching career, I've read various autobiographies and various books of people. And one thing that I'd taken to my coaching, as well as just like that I've learned over a few years of being in this job, is, I guess, authenticity is pretty important. I think that if people, no matter what you're saying, if it's right or wrong or stupid or clever, if people know it's genuine and it's what you actually believe and it's what you stand for, people can often get behind it. I went through, what's interesting is I felt like in my life before esports, I wasn't necessarily like being true to who I was. And there was something about esports when I was like, I guess either I'm hanging around with gamers all the time or because I'm in America away from home. You know how sometimes when you go on holiday, there's an air of freedom to do whatever you want because it's not my home. No one's going to remember if I'm stupid or whatever you do, And I kind of ended up just being me. And almost every time I just did something genuine, which I thought was the right thing to do or acted the way I was, it was almost always met by positive feedback or something good happened. And I think one of the things we did is whenever I came on your podcasts, it was something similar. I kind of just was as open as I could be without revealing everything. And almost always the feedback was pretty overwhelmingly good. And as far as I know, it hasn't got me into any trouble competitively or with my team. No one said anything bad. So yeah, I try and live my life the same sort of way where I try to be as real as possible, as cliche as that sounds.
I think many of us have made this experience that online platforms or relationships lead to maybe more private conversations fairly quickly. Like I can play a game with someone, I invite them in voice, and then 2 hours later we're talking about relationships or whatever. Mm-hmm. Is that an experience you've also had?
Maybe. I'm not sure totally. I agree that overall, I guess because you don't know them, maybe that people are happy to be slightly more open, or because it's over text chat, you get the idea that whatever you say isn't going to come back to haunt you or anything like that. But I don't know if I necessarily have like mega deep conversations with people online.
Yeah. So I guess the next one is a very open question by the nature of it. What did it take you to get to your position now?
Honestly, I think a huge amount of luck. I think that there's very few people who can say that they got to a position where I am or somewhere near the Overwatch League or especially near the top without a portion of luck. Obviously, I had to dedicate a lot of time. I had to make sacrifices in terms of university, or even if I was enrolled, I wasn't exactly going very often. And by default, when you play for a team, before I was even coaching, if you're dedicating yourself to 3 scrim blocks a day, 6 days a week, almost all attempts at social activity or whatever you want to do has to go out the window. So there's obviously sacrifices. But for me, ultimately, I think what helped me I was probably not qualified to get into the league when I did, to be honest with you. I'd only been coaching for 3 or 4 weeks. But Hayes, who was someone I was close to, either saw something in me or whatever it was, and he was able to give me a chance. So I think ultimately what helped me was my personal relationships with people. And then I guess once I got that opportunity, I kind of realized that I loved coaching more than I loved playing, and I kind of just went from strength to strength there.
Was it only Hayes that got you in, or was it also Kirby who was? I think he was your coach on Shavs. Back in the day, right?
I had an existing relationship with Kirby, obviously from the coaching. But I think Kirby was less sure than Hayes of me. So I think those two had to like talk about it a little bit. I definitely think it was mainly Hayes that pushed for it more than Kirby.
As far as I could tell, you've been a professional now for 3 years in different capacities. I think the first one would have been Hollywood Hammers, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The premise of this organization was always interesting. Was ever a celebrity in Hollywood a fan of yours?
No, it was interesting. The org itself, it obviously had ambitions to be in the league, and it felt like it actually had like pretty significant backing from what I know. There's a big Chinese theater on Hollywood Boulevard, which I think is actually the spawn doors in Hollywood is based off this exact theater, right? And the owners of that, maybe it's called TCL or something, invested heavily into Hammers with the goal of becoming Hollywood Hammers or whatever we would have to rebrand to within the league. And I guess me being the naive little boy that I was, I thought, oh yeah, this is it. This is my shot. I'm going to get into the league with this org. Like many others who went down similar paths than me. But we actually did. We moved out to California for a while. I mean, it wasn't good. There was a lot of problems that we had. Most of all, that I think that almost by the time they'd find a way to fly us out, they'd kind of realized that Blizzard had stopped replying to calls and that it wasn't going to happen. So they were kind of in this really awkward position where they were investing money into a house and salaries for us, but they kind of knew that the end goal was never feasible. But we did actually have an office in the theater itself. So we did literally have to walk down Hollywood Boulevard to go to work every day for a few months. And we did do a party at one of the owners' house in Hollywood Hills or somewhere. So it wasn't all bad. But yeah, that was my first taste of being paid to do esports. I guess it only lasted 2 months before they sent us home. But lessons learned, I suppose.
Did it feel at that point that the dream was over?
No, I don't think so. I was pretty motivated. One of the problems we had on the Hollywood Hammers was that, especially once you fly a team over to America, roster changes become extremely difficult. So internally, we were talking about a few players that we wanted to like potentially replace and upgrade the roster, and it weren't possible. So we were in this position on the team where we felt like most of our pieces were competitive and could be good. But at the same time, we were like capped by management, and we had this crazy idea. I think that we were gonna. Do you remember the team Movie Star Riders? With like Neptuno, Swoosh, Logics. We were gonna form half Hammers, half Movie Star Riders because they folded at the same time. We were gonna make some like God Squad, which I was really excited for. And I think the problem was Shaz got contacted by Giganti, and obviously because he's not an idiot, he took that position, and then the dream kind of fell through. But at least immediately post Hammers, I felt like we were going to merge teams. We were going to become like a close to a European super team, and I was pretty excited. But that didn't happen, and then I guess I can't remember what happened. Then I can't remember where I went. Mosaic, maybe. I did a brief stint at places like Envision. I did for a week, which was like a real highlight in my career in a lot of ways. And then obviously World Cup was in between. Yeah. And then, yeah, I guess the Mosaic travesty happened after that.
Do you think you'd be here without that World Cup performance?
No, I think that maybe actually. I think what's interesting is that when I was most highly rated as a player was after that World Cup performance, and it's after we beat Rogue on Envision, right? Because I went into Envision for 1 week, we snapped Rogue's winning streak, and then I left, right? So everyone's like, "Oh God, this guy's crazy good." And obviously, I got quite a few Overwatch League trials for season 1. Actually, maybe even as many as 4 or 5. But it was only looking back at it that I realized I was really bad back then. Maybe I didn't realize at the time. And what I think there's a certain irony is that across season 1, my reputation got smashed because I was on teams that lost and lost and lost. But I actually felt like at the end of season 1, I was a much better player than I was the year before. But my reputation internally had gone the other way, where instead of getting trials because people thought I was good, I was getting no trials because people thought I was bad. And I think season 2, I actually got 0 trials. When, like, if you ask me, I was a much better player back then. Which I suppose there's some sort of irony there.
What is it like to have been? I assume you've been playing video games with the incentive to become professional in some sort for a long time beforehand. What was it like to make that decision? Okay, I'm going to step back from active play and become a coach.
It was. I felt in a lot of ways it was almost me being finished. I didn't necessarily think that. I wasn't naive enough to believe that, okay, I'm going to go coach and I'm going to make it into league immediately. Actually, ironically, when I played, I often said to myself, I'm never going to become one of these people that retires and goes coach just because it's an easier way to get a paycheck and I can somehow pretend to live the dream for longer than I can. So I often said, okay, if I am done playing and I think my time is over, I'm just going to go back to school. I'm just going to live a normal life. But there was interesting that a few people had spoke to me and they said that, okay, your personality type makes sense. Like one thing that was interesting as a player, I was always the captain of every team I played for, and I was always the leader of every single team I played for. And obviously coaching involves a pretty significant amount of leadership. And I remember it was the day I decided to retire was after the Paris Group Stage World Cup, because that was the exact moment I felt like I was playing my best Overwatch. I felt like that World Cup, that was going to be my time to prove everybody. And to be honest, I choked super hard. I played terribly across the weekend. We still qualified, but we got smashed by Paris, and the teams we beat. I think my team, the other players on my team are so good that it was almost impossible not to qualify, because I actually think Team UK is pretty stacked. So I decided to retire, and what I did was I actually, at the airport, I messaged Nuki, and I knew that they had a position for British Hurricanes, some coach. So I rang her up and I said, like, do you think there's a chance that I can get a trial? And she said, yeah. We did a little interview, and then she gave me a trial, and then I think things went like ridiculously well almost immediately. And it was almost within a week of coaching Hurricane that I realized, okay, maybe there is actually something here for me. Yeah.
Yeah, as far as I could tell, around 1.5 years after you became like a full-time esports professional, you then switched. The tweet was October 3rd, 2018, that you officially became a coach. What's that mindset change like? Does it sometimes feel like, in the beginning, did it feel like, oh my God, I wish I could sit down at this PC and just do it myself?
No, not necessarily. I always knew that I was extremely limited as a player, because I think mechanically I was about the worst main tank that has ever existed in Overwatch. So I always knew, especially like when I would watch the Overwatch League and I'd see these guys juggling Pharahs in the sky, I was like, I can never get there. Like, these guys are far better than I can ever be. But I just thought that it was possible through like communication and leadership that maybe one of the teams that was the Western focus, maybe there was a space for me within the league, and then maybe we can see what happens. And then maybe if it becomes a Reinhardt matter or something, then I can prove myself. But one thing I still believe to this day, and I've always believed, is in a lot of ways, I fell more in love with competing and being on a team more than I did necessarily Overwatch or playing the game. And obviously, like, there's a huge dream that I've realized being in a team house with a group of players and being able to compete against other people who are also in a team house, who are also competing. And both parties only have one thing on their mind for a full 12 months, and that's to be the best. And I think even growing up as a kid, obviously I never thought it could be in video games, but I always wanted to be a football player. And that was always like a huge dream of mine, was to be able to live my life just within a team. And our only goal is to compete. And there's nothing else that literally nothing else matters in life. And that was always something that obviously appealed to me more than any other profession possible. And I think after a while, I realized that as a coach, you can still compete just as hard as being a player, even if sometimes once the match starts, you lose control of what's happening, and it's a much more daunting experience. You know, it's much more nervous to watch than to play a lot of the time. But it was pretty quick that I realized that the itch for competing still exists as a coach just as much as a player.
That's nice to hear. I want to change a little bit in terms of the overarching topic, and want to go a little bit into change and learning and also growing within this scene. Have you noticed any changes in you since you've become an esports professional, and maybe during that time in yourself?
I think since I joined Fusion 2 years ago, I've grown more in 2 years than I did in the previous 22. I mean, there's a lot of things that it teaches you when you actually have a full-time job. You know, like even when you're playing at home, even if I was getting paid by hammers, it was almost different to what it is now. You know, like I'm in a company. There's a lot of people who count on me and the team that aren't just the players playing. You know, like we have like marketing and management and all these other people, whose careers rests on our performance just as much as ours do. And obviously, the certain aspects, like one thing that I had to do when I came here was Philly made us as coaches find our own accommodation. They didn't cover it for us. I think that was like some sort of attempt to make us learn independence. So all of a sudden, I go from being 22 years old, lived at home except for a few years where I lived at uni accommodation, but that was still in the same city where I was half an hour drive from home. So I was never too far away from the nest. And then it says, okay, Chris, you've got to book yourself a plane ticket over to America. You have to immediately find a place to stay. You have to set up bank accounts, phone numbers, all this. Then you need to go. You need to find a place to live near where the player house is. Oh, and you have like 1 week before it begins, you know? So almost immediately I'm thrown into real life really fast, you know? And obviously I have to either adapt or it's going to be extremely anxiety inducing and incredibly stressful. But I managed and it was fine. And then from then I kind of, I guess I just grew and grew doing more normal things. I then decided that I wanted to lose a lot of weight because I was too fat. And I think that itself is also one of the greatest, if you ever talk to anyone who's lost weight, I think you realize a lot about life very fast once you do that. You realize like the importance of just discipline and sticking to something over time. And then what's really interesting is there is always something addictive about weighing yourself at the end of the week and you've seen that you've lost something. And then, okay, well, I'm going to do that again. I'm going to do that again. And once you get into that habit and that routine of constantly like chasing a goal every single week, you realize that that is almost the premise for how life is in general, you know? Like if you actually, if it's not about like winning stuff overnight, it's about a long-term effort. It's about the discipline. It's about doing the hard stuff every single day instead of giving in to the temptations of eating or not running or whatever it is. And then once you realize like, oh, no matter what I want to improve at, if it's losing weight or if it's getting better at coaching or whatever skill, this is the formula of how life works. And once I learned that through losing weight, then I think that kind of opened my eyes to how almost everything in life works, I think.
Do you feel comfortable sharing your methods, how you lost this much weight?
Yeah, I mean, it's not crazy. I did the intermittent fasting, which I think is what a lot of people did. I have a borderline eating disorder where I'm the most fussy eater that you've ever encountered. So for me, eating salads and stuff all day was going to be extremely difficult for me. So I still ate pretty poorly, but I made sure that I limited it to a certain amount of calories. And I also got into the habit of running every single day, which again, I think that's one of the best things that someone can do is run every day, because also like obviously it's overwhelmingly healthy for you and you'll notice the effects in terms of your energy levels and just like your overall mental health if you go for a run every day. But then there's also the same concept of being able to improve over time. Like, okay, I ran this far, I ran in this time yesterday, maybe I can beat it, maybe I can beat it, maybe I can beat it. And I think your life gets into a pretty nice pattern when the guilt of not running starts to overtake the I don't want to run, you know? So it was just sticking to sometimes it was a pretty savage amount of calories, but I learned to deal with the hunger pretty easily. And on top of that, I run every morning or maybe in one of the breaks between scrims. And then, yeah, that was it. I don't think I did anything too crazy. To be honest, it only took me about 6 months to lose the vast majority of it. And then after that, I allowed myself to eat 2 meals a day. I still made sure I kept my running in. But my weight never went back up, and I stayed where I am now.
Have you ever invited a player to run with you?
Yes, we did it quite a lot. I mean, Poco is obviously mega fit, so me and Poco used to run quite a lot. Neptuno too, I tried on many occasions, and we did, to be fair, sometimes, because Neptuno does the same. You know, he goes through periods where he's running every day, and then he'll like lose motivation and he'll drop it. So I kept trying to, okay, well, let's go now. But the problem is, you know, me and Neptuno were both kind of stubborn and both competitive people. So I had a certain way which I ran in terms of the speed, and he had a certain way. I used to do something like it was almost like interval training where I would run for a time, then walk, then run for a time, then walk. Whereas he wanted to run at the snail's pace, but he wanted to run continuously. So even when we'd go running together, I'd almost always just leave him after 30 seconds and we'd see each other back at the house. So we tried on a few occasions. I think even Snillo, once he came back from the uni team, he would sometimes come running with me. So overall, Fusion, at least season 2, was a pretty fit and active team. So it was pretty easy to do, yeah.
Is Neptuno as good at football as they say he is?
We used to play football 2 or 3 times a week last year. And it was honestly by far, well, obviously because the Overwatch wasn't a highlight, but that was by far the highlight of last year, was the group that we had together and we could go play football with each other. It was sometimes 2 or 3 times a week continuously, which is also unbelievable for your fitness, by the way. 2 hours of football burns so many more calories than just a half-hour run. But Neptuno is really good. Technically, he's excellent. He's Spanish, so there's some sort of like genetic ability to be technical. But I always insisted that I was better because at least I would run around the pitch more. I would cover more ground, so I was more valuable. But when he got the ball, he was technically very, very good. I can't deny it.
Is there anyone in Overwatch League that you played with that surprised you?
I think Ben Best is actually ridiculously good at football. He's better than me and Neptuno combined. Yeah, Ben. Do you know who also really good that might surprise people? Twilight. He's technically excellent. His when he gets the ball, his shot, his pass, his dribbling it's might be like Ben Best level or maybe better. So Twilight was definitely a surprise pick, but I think Ben Best is like actually really, really, really good at football.
That's did you guys also play with Huck?
Yeah, Huck would come every week, but without being disrespectful, those who came from North America stood no chance when they were playing with the Europeans. It was a different league out there.
Right, makes sense. To get back on the topic of change, I've also found that one thing that had changed about you is maybe the calculatedness, or I suppose the ability to just sit back and let the first take on an issue simmer and then reevaluate. I found a tweet from November 4th, 2016.
I don't like this.
It goes the following. Actually, don't know anyone can be happy with Overwatch League. And the second tweet, pretty much 30 minutes after, is, after looking more into it, it's not terrible. If they include region locks, it's actually horrible, though. Two questions. How do you evaluate that take now? And do you think you've gotten better to even your temper?
I actually don't even know what I was complaining about. I can't tell you what I was complaining about. But for sure, before Fusion, I was so arrogant and so naive as a person. Like, if you ever watch me on LAN, I was so cocky. I was like Dogman 2.0, whilst also being a feeder, I was like simultaneously the worst player in the server, but the most cocky. Which is, I don't know, I guess it was a problem. I mean, explains why I was so bad. I was definitely someone who, after season 1, it's like I said, I didn't realize I was bad. So I thought the fact that I remember Philly specifically, I could not believe that they would pick up this Korean main tank who had to serve this big boosting ban that had never played in a team. I couldn't believe they picked him ahead of me. And I was actually so mad. I was like, Kirby and Hayes, the coaches, I know all the players and they didn't pick me. I actually felt like I didn't take it well. And there was at no point where did I, during that process, take a step back and think, I need to be better. I honestly felt like I'd been robbed, and I had this like super, super arrogant, super egotistical way of viewing the world in which like I'm an insane player. These guys just don't know what they're talking about. And I remember saying, "Oh, Philly's gonna epic fail. Like, what are they doing? Like, terrible decisions, And then, to be honest with you, the big turning point in my career came when I met KDG on Mosaic, and I learned, or Six Snakes we were, and he kind of taught me how to play, and it was only once I learned how to play that I realized that I didn't know how to play before, and that in itself became a really important lesson for me, that people, when they're bad and they're arrogant and they're egotistical, they don't know it, and that becomes part of the problem. And I think one thing that I think I'm good at now, and I think is one of the most important skills in life and in my self-improvement, is becoming self-aware and learning to like try and look at myself from an outside perspective. Like, okay, if I saw this fat, ugly UK kid like fist pounding after he was just feeding for a map on stage, what would I think? I'd think I hate that guy. But then when it's me, you don't realize it. And it's only after a while, which I kind of learned that I had to be more self-aware, that I think most of my improvements, both just as a person and as a player came in.
Yeah. Well, I had this theory for a while that the best coaches have the ability to break a player in a sense where the ego now takes a step back, possibly not unlike something that people would go through in military basic training. Do you think that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that I read in the books, which is one of the themes that was consistent, no matter the coach of the book that I read, one message came through, was that if the player believes deep down that you have their best interests at heart, you can say anything to them and they'll take it well. The only problem you have as a coach is when the player thinks he's only doing this for his own ego, or like to get one over on you, which maybe there's like coaches in the league who suffer with those player relations. But as long as you can say anything to a player, but as long as they deep down believe that this coach wants what's best for me, it's going to get through in one way or another. And even if it's rejected terribly at the time, maybe when they lie in bed that night, they're gonna think about what you said, and then maybe it sinks in across like a few weeks, But that's definitely something that I learned from reading. I think it's definitely true from my personal experience.
Is there a way to communicate that to a player, or do you have to do it with any communication that you have a sense of care for them?
I don't think. I think it's almost. It doesn't work if I say, by the way, I only care about you, so this is what you need to do, because that doesn't work. They have to believe it, and they can only do that over time from working with you and knowing you, and seeing how like you react to various things. It's hard to explain. Like, to be honest with you, I couldn't even tell you now if my players think that or don't think that. It's difficult for me to know. But obviously, I do care about them all a lot, and I hope that they know that. But yeah, even now, I would never tell them explicitly like this is why you need to listen to me, because that almost defeats the purpose of it. It almost then feels like you're starting to trick them and manipulate them by saying this. So it comes back to the authenticity thing. They have to genuinely believe what I'm saying is what I feel, and that my motivation for saying these things is right.
What do you believe your underlying incentives are? Are you doing it for them? Are you doing it for yourself? Are you doing it for both of those groups at the same time?
I think more than anything, I do it for the team. I do it for the Fusion. I think that's where almost all of, if something is not in a player's interest, but it's better for the team, then I'm either gonna advocate for it or I'm gonna do it. I think that almost all of my loyalty has to go to the badge, But at the same time, I'm not going to be ruthless, because I appreciate that the players and the coaches are human beings, and once you go through a season of Overwatch League, you share so many ups and downs with them. Your bond as friends and as teammates becomes incredibly strong, and it's impossible not to care a lot about how they land. Maybe if it's afterlife on Fusion or whatever it is, you care a lot for the players. But I think part of being a good coach is that. And it's the same for a player in the team, but everyone has to understand that the team comes first. And it's easy to make sacrifices personally or whatever if you buy into that.
Have you personally defined goals and goals for the team?
No, I don't think so. One thing about being an assistant coach is that I don't necessarily have a huge amount of importance in terms of like setting in and making sure that like long-term goals are met. Like, if I will obviously talk to players if I think either there's like something they need to fix on a personal level or like work ethic related, but I'm never the one that sits there and says, oh, goal for this season is this, you have to do this, you have to do this. That's people above me, and it's my job just to kind of nudge players in the right direction.
Do you have to sometimes swallow, or often swallow, emotion in that line of work, in that position?
Yes, sometimes. I think it's something I've got better at. Season 2 was a huge learning experience for me, because because to be completely honest, Fusion itself was relatively dysfunctional when I came into it. The success of season 1 hadn't set the team up for any success in season 2. And one potential problem I had was coming from being an average to bad contenders players to becoming a coach of the Overwatch League. It's very hard for the players to respect you. As much as they try with the right ideas, it's difficult for them just to come in and just give you like the undying respect. So you almost have to earn it in a way. So there was a lot of times I was telling players, okay, your attitude's bad or this is bad, and then it just wouldn't go down well, and it would just lead to arguments, and I would end up getting stressed and angry, and it wasn't a good situation. And over time I learned how to not let players see that side of like your emotions, and at the same time, hopefully over time I've gained their respect in some way, so that those conversations where they get like too heated happen less often or not at all, as probably the case has been this season.
If I asked you to create a pie chart of the emotions you go through the week, how would you think? How much of it is joy, satisfaction, frustration, whatnot?
I mean, the joy almost always comes at the end of the week if you get the win. I think the vast majority of the week building up to the game is often either... I mean, sometimes you're confident. Sometimes if you have an opponent you know you're going to beat and the scrims are going well, like you don't necessarily, especially this season, I can say that there's been at least some weeks where I wasn't worried going into it. Whereas last year, that wasn't the case at all. Every single game, no matter who it was against, that I wasn't sure if we were going to win or lose. And it became an incredibly stressful thing. For me, I guess it's weird to say, but I get less stressed about the result more than I know what the impact of a bad week of practice can mean. This year, again, like I think it's really hard for me to draw on too many negatives, but I think last year there was often weeks where I saw a bad week of practice and I knew in my head, if this transforms into a bad result, then next week's going to be actual hell. Like there's going to be kickoffs, there's going to be whatever it's going to be, which happened a lot. This year again, we've been okay, not so bad. But to me, the most stressful thing was knowing that, okay, if this attitude and week of scrims turns into a bad result, then next week's going to get even worse. And then the week after that, maybe it gets even worse. And sometimes when you look at the fixture list and you'd see like, oh, after this week we have New York, then shocked in New York again, you realize that these are going to be an incredibly long 3 weeks in a lot of ways.
Do you think the game Overwatch is a good communicator? So the games that you play, a good communicator of what the average player or the coaching staff go through throughout the week?
What do you mean, sorry?
So you practice 5 days, pretty hardcore hours. Then you have a game on Saturday, and you got to put it all in. Do you think that the level of play that you display, or any given team displays, do you think there is something underlying that the fan can appreciate in terms of like what it takes to be this good, or above world-class level, I suppose?
Yeah, I don't think people can see it. I think that people on the outside have almost no idea of what actually happens during a week within a team. They see none of the stresses, none of the arguments, none of the nights where you have to stay up thinking, if we run this strategy, are we going to get rolled? Is this the way to go? Like, especially in hero pools, that was obviously conversations we had to have a lot. Sometimes they see a team that comes out, performs poorly and loses, and then they shit on you, and then they don't see how hard that week of losing scrims just to lose in a tournament has been. They don't see like the arguments and the stress and how everything kind of comes to a head during the week. And they just see a team and they almost always assume, oh, this team's just like lazy, or this team's got like bad coaching. They don't understand that we are trying our absolute best, but there's just significant problems in our way. People really have no idea, I think.
Should there be systems to highlight that more? For instance, like a video camera team following your practice and giving an authentic insight?
I mean, maybe. I mean, I think from a purely content point of view, I think it's something that would be really interesting to see. Obviously, I don't think it's necessarily in teams' interest to do so. I think the ultimate thing is like this is what we signed up for in a lot of ways. Like if we thought this was a regular job where people come in, they check out, there's no arguments, and we play a game at the end of the week and we win and we're slightly happy and we lose and we're slightly sad, then we wouldn't do what we do, you know. The emotions on one end of the spectrum in terms of how happy you are when you win, the only way to get to that this far in the spectrum is also to go the other way, you know, and have like the lowest of lows. And that's what's good about our job is maybe the average job, if you like, the spectrum's here. But in the end, it widens in both ways. And obviously, when you're on this end of the spectrum, like we've been this season, it's so worth it. And obviously, it feels like hell when you're on this end of the spectrum. But that truly is like part of the job, you know. Like for me, I'd take these sleepless nights where we're having like team meetings and we're like thinking about everything. I'd take them over a regular job all day, any day, you know, because I think it's something that not many people get to experience, even if in the moment it feels pretty negative.
Can you explain what it's like to be in your position?
Yeah, maybe.
Let me add onto it, maybe. Would you recommend it to someone?
I think that I truly love my job. Like for a second, I haven't contemplated, no matter how stressful it got during this season or last season, I haven't considered quitting for a single second. I genuinely love what I do. But when people come into coaching or playing, they have to understand that there is obviously sacrifices you have to make in terms of your outside life of the game. Like you truly have to dedicate everything to be good at this. Because I promise you, it's less fun when you don't dedicate everything to it. When you don't dedicate, when you half-ass it, and all of a sudden you start to lose the game, the job gets a lot less fun. And I think for a lot of people, I've seen people who within esports, either not even before Overwatch League, people who just like playing games but really can't handle the added stress and expectations of having to perform week on week, and when it doesn't go bad, everything goes wrong. Like I've met a lot of people across my career who are extremely happy just to always be friends and always to do this and just we come to scrim and we have a good time and we didn't lose, that's okay this week. And those people almost always burn out and quit the scene as soon as possible. I think it's very difficult for people with that attitude to survive long term. You have to be someone that understands that when things go bad, things are going to be really bad, and when things go well, things are going to be really good. I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I also think that you have to have a certain personality type to be able to survive in an industry like ours.
Is this your dream goal job? Have you arrived, or do you want to go up the ladder or maybe go into an adjacent role, let's say general manager or whatnot down the line?
No, I always want to be involved in game theory. I never want to be in a situation where I'm like above talking about what we play, how we play, all this. I am extremely happy in my current position. I don't think I'm necessarily someone that sees like head coach as this end goal. To me, being part of a good team is far more important than being a bigger piece in a worse team, you know? One thing I can say about life at the Fusion is like everything you would want as a coach is met in terms of like there is an ambition at Fusion, which I think a lot of teams in the league don't have, which obviously allows us to be the most competitive we want to be, which is you can't put enough value in having an ownership that's truly ambitious to win it all. I think there's a lot of coaches and players in other teams who either have like smaller budgets or just like less ambition overall, or they're more interested in like making money or whatever it ends up being. I think that's excellent. That's why I love being at the Fusion. And I think I'm pretty close to my dream job. Yeah, I think maybe one day if Manchester United come in and say, Chris, you want to come be a coach at this team, maybe I'd jump ship. But I think apart from that, I think there's nothing that would stop me doing what I do now.
So it doesn't necessarily have to stay within the confines of esports. You would also go to sports if the opportunity.
Only football, I think. Nothing else. That's always been my number one passion in life and still is to this day. Obviously, that's impossible. Like, there's no way for me to get a job in football, or maybe, who knows. But to me, like, this is as close. To be honest with you, I probably do much better as an esports coach than a football coach because I think I understand the demographic of people that play the game far better than I would like traditional sports figures. So that still remains like a dream that I think about at night. But I really think that I'm as happy in my profession as I could ever expect to be come 24 years of age.
Is there any future angst about the development of your career? Because esports changes seemingly rapidly, and it feels like in order to remain a coach, you got to stay flexible in terms of like understanding new games, and we don't know where this thing is going. We might as well move to virtual reality. Is this something that, like, down the line, let's say in 10 years, 20 years, that weighs on your mind?
I mean, I think there is absolutely, everyone in esports is aware of this isn't a job which I expect to be doing in 10 years, you know? Maybe I'm underselling the growth of esports and how it might be possible to transition into other games or into other positions within esports, and it might be something that I can make a genuine career out of. But I absolutely am kind of just living life in the now. I guess people in esports, the upside to all of the sacrifices we have to make is that I probably earn more money than a lot of people who are my age that went to my school do, you know? So it means that whenever this thing runs out, even if I don't have qualifications, I at least hopefully have enough savings to do something with my life where at least it makes the rest of my life slightly easier. And I can say that I went out and I lived my dream, and I never have to live with the regret of not taking this opportunity. And maybe in 5 years, my life becomes more difficult because I'm a man who's my only qualification is I've coached gamers how to click heads for 5 years, and maybe regular employers don't look at that with any merit. But I think life's sometimes about the chances you do take more than just like taking the easy road out, you know?
Do you have a plan B, something like that you want to pursue after, like if Manchester United possibly stops being a team till then, or if esports has an end of the road for you? Is there something you'd like to pursue?
I really don't know. I think I'm all in on plan A, and we'll see how plan B shakes up if it comes down to it. There's too many like ifs and buts. I did contemplate if I end up retiring and it all comes to an end, of actually like seriously taking they call like the coaching badges in football, right? And maybe that would be a good place to use my savings to look to go into that. But I think it's also really possible that with no experience playing at all, that a career in football is unlikely. So I don't know. I really have to just take it day by day and just hope to make the most out of this opportunity while I have it.
Very good. Maybe as one closing question, and sort of like to give something to the listener or reader on the way, is there an opinion that you hold that you still feel strongly about, but you expect to be in the minority as to hold it? So for instance, one thing would be, of course, hero pools. That was one where we sort of amended a little bit. Is there anything like this?
To be fair, not that I can think of, really. No, terrible way to end the interview, but I can't say as there is, no unfortunately, no.
No worries. Then thank you for the interview, and this was a GGRecon exclusive, hopefully on your YouTube soon. Thanks for your time, ChristTFer.